You're listening to Maccabee Nation, episode number 2. The kids aren't all right. Why are so many students now supporting Islamo-fascist terror groups like Hamas, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, and even Al-Qaeda's Osama bin Laden? Let's start with recognizing that the disconnect is both along party lines and generational, as shown in the chart in the article. It seems like a symptom of the American left, moving away from ideals like color blindness and meritocracy in an effort to lump everyone into two categories, oppressors or oppressed. Unfortunately, the world is much more nuanced, and much like your favorite George R.R. Martin Game of Thrones book, morality is often gray as hell. To give just one example about why details matter when discussing these complicated topics, let's take the debate about apartheid. Right now, there are roughly 2 million Arabs living in Israel within the Green Line, which represents about 20% of the population. Arabs living in Israel outside of Gaza and the West Bank, or what Israelis call Judea and Samaria, have full voting rights, freedom of movement, and are represented in government. Is it perfect? Certainly not. But as the only democracy in the Middle East, Arabs living in Israel have more upward mobility and higher standards of living than in neighboring countries, and most Israeli Arabs say they prefer living in Israel. What about the Arabs living in areas controlled by Hamas in Gaza and Fatah in the West Bank that do not have the ability to vote or move freely? The question of if this constitutes apartheid requires a detailed understanding of the history of Israel, how it formed, the wars fought, and the peace treaties that were signed defining how these areas would be treated, that you can't learn in a 15-second Instagram reel. I'd argue this is certainly not apartheid, but it took me tons of hours of research, listening to experts, and first-hand experience living there to reach that conclusion. For college students to not only have opinions on these types of matters without any context, but to actually try to influence policy based on a half-dozen TikToks they saw on the toilet is beyond stupid and arrogant. But wait, do young people really care about this at all? When you listen to the kids talk at these rallies, it doesn't take long before you hear them veer off on anti-capitalist and anti-Western rants. They basically want to burn down the current system and replace it with something better they can't articulate. According to Newsweek polls, Americans 18 to 29 care most this election cycle about inflation, healthcare, and housing costs, and gun violence. Out of 16 issues on the poll, the war in Gaza ranked 15th with only 34% of respondents choosing it as a top concern. So why are we seeing massive protests on elite campuses like American students were just called to be drafted and head over to Gaza and northern Lebanon to fight? Qatar has been funneling money into these universities and putting teachers in place who push their agenda and false narratives. It's no wonder the teachers aren't trying to lower the temperature. They're a huge part of the problem. It's not helping that foreign governments like the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, have their fingers on the scale to manipulate the media young people are seeing. The result is a powder keg of manufactured ignorance that not only undermines the safety of Jews in the diaspora, but is also designed to weaken Western institutions by undermining patriotism and national cohesion. So how does it end? Well, we're not even past the gaslighting phase yet. News outlets are still claiming these are peaceful protests, protected under the First Amendment, when in reality we see with our eyes and ears people calling for the genocide of Jews, Jews being physically attacked, Jews whose movements are being obstructed on campuses. The leader of the protest on Columbia's campus, Kimani James, brazenly called for murdering Zionists in his academic hearing, video in the article on Substack, and yet has only been banned from campus thus far and not expelled. Unless the federal and state governments are willing to take serious actions to protect Jews, this is a civil rights issue. This will not end quickly. While it pains me to see predominantly marginalized groups Jews have advocated for in the past, leading the charge against us now, we should not allow that betrayal to sully our values going forward. We need to be strong in our convictions to continue supporting equality. But we should no longer neglect focusing on defending our own rights while doing so. Stay classy, Maccabee Nation. Until next time.